Mother May is brought to you by Peak. Peak original equipment technology is formulated with the same corrosion-inhibiting technology that protected your vehicle when it left the factory. It provides excellent protection against rust and corrosion to all cooling system metals, including aluminum, and is fully compatible with other extended life coolants. With its line of premium 50/50 pre-diluted and concentrated coolant specifically designed to match the technology and color requirements of your specific vehicle, and color cues on the packaging and label in a list of covered vehicles make it easy to identify the right match for your vehicle. Find out more information about all Peak antifreeze and coolants at peakauto.com. And Drag Race Bracket Bonanza, the first dynamic competition for drag racing fans. Go to dragracebracketbonanza.com. It's free. When the fields are set on Saturday night at the Route 66 Nationals presented by Peak, pick all your round-by-round winners in all 4 pro categories. Sign up at dragracebracketbonanza.com at the link below. Day 2 of Indianapolis 500 practice has wrapped up here from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We actually did get some running in today. It was kind of a bit of a question at the beginning of the week on whether or not we were actually going to see cars on track come today. But luckily enough, the rain forecast coming into this morning forecasted that it was going to end about noon. It kind of ended at noon, came back at 1, left at 1:30, came back at 1:40, and we didn't really end up going until about 2:30 to 3 p.m. But then after that, we got almost smooth sailing all the way to the end, and we got to see about 4 hours of on-track action. And man, oh man, in those 4 hours, did we see a lot. We got to see the early signs of who's not, who's fast, who's slow. And for the first 4 hours heading into tomorrow, we're going to see a lot more clean track action. There were a lot of storylines that get to come out of this first day of actual full track action. Looking into really the first few highlights of it, I'm also going to go with probably the big story is going to be Kyle Larson. I was a bit impressed with how Kyle Larson performed here today. He came out of the track immediately when the gun first fired. He was straight onto the racetrack, pulling laps. He got right straight into the Andretti Armada, which is almost kind of a bit of a no-go for some teams. A lot of teams let them do their own thing. He did not wait a second. He jumped straight in there and was racing Colton Hurd or Marcus Ericsson. You could tell by the way they were driving, they weren't too keen on him doing that. And then when he was with the 17-car packs towards the end of that session, he was really making some moves that impressed me throughout the session. It was a very quick learning process for him, and he is very quickly getting up to speed behind the wheel of that Aero McLaren Chevy.
Yeah, so something that happens quite a bit is you see a lot of team running. This is when they're especially trying to work on race trim. That way, you're playing amongst your friends. And Andretti has this thing, we call it the Andretti Armada, where they send all their cars out into one giant pack, and they run together, and they pass, and they work on their race trims. Well, the last couple of years, Aero McLaren has gotten into this thing of where they kind of like to break up and insert themselves into those packs, whether it is Andretti or Ganassi, typically those two. And Kyle Larson is towing definitely the team line there of jumping right out into the middle of it. But for Kyle, that's something he needs. He needs to be able to learn to work with unfriendly traffic, because come race day, a lot of the traffic is going to be unfriendly.
Another thing I want to point out, too, is Scott McLaughlin. He ended up P1 at the end of the time sessions, which we'll get into here in a minute. But the thing I've noticed about Scott is he's gone kind of against that team format. We saw a bit later in the session where he would go out with a little power, but for most of the session, he went out there on his own and jumped straight into the dirty air and got right up to speed with those guys. We've seen in the past Scott McLaughlin has struggled. This track has not been kind to him, especially on the oval format. This is a very big change of pace for what Scott's done in the past. His 4th year in, it is the 50th anniversary of when I believe it was Gordon Johncock who won, or was it Johnny? It was Johnny Rutherford who won in that exact same scheme 50 years ago. So this is a big year for that yellow submarine number 3 Pennzoil. So to see him come right out of the gate swinging here on what really would be opening day is a big accomplishment for Scott McLaughlin as he tries to get up to speed, especially considering after how he performed back at Barber.
So Scott McLaughlin, here's the one thing about Team Penske. The best way to secure your seat at Team Penske is to win a championship or win the Indy 500. And to this point, Scott McLaughlin has won races, but he hasn't accomplished one of those 2 feats. And I think the pressure is really starting to build on him, considering last year his teammate Joseph Newgarden finally accomplished the goal, and then obviously Will Power did that back in 2018 and has since won a championship in 2022. So I think the pressure is really kind of getting to him like, hey, I need to do this. And I think the comfort level is also finally getting there, because he has had a big crash here. He has led here. He has been lap traffic here. So, there is very little to this point that he hasn't done. And so the only thing that really is left to go is to win the race.
Another thing I want to point out, too, is kind of the rookies of the field. We saw them get thrown to the wolves. One of the guys I want to point out is Nolan Siegel. At the beginning of practice, we were told beforehand by somebody that he was apparently terrified about running in the pack, and that was shown early on because he ran by himself as far and away from the toe as he could find himself, and that's how he spent the first half of the session, and then he kind of tiptoed his way through the grid trying to get up to speed in the toe. But for other guys like Christian Rasmussen, we saw some really sketchy moments with him. We saw an incident with him with Colton Herta. Colton Herta gave him the bird down the back straightaway after trying to pass him on the inside going to turn one. He got a lot of close contacts. I believe he got one with Scott McLaughlin as well. Another person as well that had a moment was Marcus Armstrong going into turn number one. You missed it. I didn't. You look down at him. He got passed right before entering turn number one. He had a big wiggle in the middle of the turn. He caught that thing and had to lift big time to avoid hitting that outside wall.
So when it comes to practicing at Indianapolis, a lot of this week up until really tomorrow and then Friday, like everything up until that point is practicing on race trim because everything is down to such a condensed time. There is a real frantic nature to this. And for a lot of the rookies, the conditions are different here between April and May here in Indianapolis. And when it comes down to the rookies running and getting that pack experience, there's a lot less downforce on the cars now compared to when they ran last time and they did their ROPs. So with Nolan Siegel, it really did show that he was struggling very early on. But he really got acclimated rather quickly. It took quite a bit of the session for him to get there, but you could tell, it was night and day difference, basically, from when they started to when, unfortunately, the caution and checkered flag flew at the end of the session. But, Marcus Armstrong, somebody else who kind of got acclimated, they had a different approach because there are 3 rookies amongst those 5 cars. They really sent Palou and Dixon, the team leaders, out there and kind of showed them the ropes by running in the Ganassi exclusive pack and like, hey, this is what you can do. This is where you should pass, and you can really see that as an example from Palou and Dixon.
Speaking of Palou as well, something that I'm going to point out lastly before we go into the practice times is how Palou ran in this session. We've seen him come here in the past, and he's been comfortable at this racetrack besides 2020 when he was here at Team Go. Ever since joining Ganassi, he's really acclimated himself to this oval quickly. But today is kind of a side of Alex Palou that I haven't seen out of him, especially on this type of circuit. He was very aggressive moving his way to the pack. He was taking no prisoners. He hung people out to dry. He passed him late going into the corner. He made every bit sure that he knew how this car felt in traffic, and he is on a very, very aggressive elbows out mentality of he wants to win this 500.
Well, if you go back, keep in mind the Team Go entry was with Dale Coyne Racing, and they qualified in the top 9. He was in that Fast 9 shootout, but this is the same chassis that Alex Palou set the pole position track record in last year. So this is a car that he knows very well. We know this car is very good. So for him, I think it's more figuring out where the limit for this car is because he does know this car really well. And because the one thing that kind of hindered him last year from winning the 500 was being able to pass. And if he was able to knock off a couple more, because keep in mind he finished in 5th or 6th, but if he would have been able to get a couple more passes where he should have, then he probably would have been right there in the hunt for the win. So I think for him, it's kind of like trying to right the wrongs of last year that kept him from having his face on a silver trophy down there.
And then looking into the practice results so we can get straight to the interviews later on. Looking number 1 at the end of the session would be Scott McLaughlin, 229.493. Saw him at the top of the board. He currently has the fastest speed of the month so far, clipping Scott Dixon's time, which was the second fastest speed in opening day history at the Speedway. Finishing second would be his teammate Will Power. Third is going to be Colton Herta of the Andretti Armada camp. Really strong start for the Andretti camp. He has a couple teams that are up there. Joseph Newgarden, the reigning 500 champion, rounds out 4th. Alexander Rossi back in 5th. Cal Kirkwood rounds out in 6th. Pato O'Ward, who's very strong at the track in the past, he finds himself 7th at the end of day 2. Alex Palou rounds out 8th. Ryan Hunter-Reay driving for Dreyer and Reinbold, the 2014 champion, the 10-year anniversary of his iconic 500-mile win. He rounds out in 9th, and then the 4-time champion Elio Castroneves rounds out in 10th.
It shouldn't be a surprise to see Hunter-Reay up there in the top 10. Last year when he came here with the Dreyer and Reinbold camp for the first year, he was very impressive and actually helped him secure a deal for the rest of the season with Ed Carpenter Racing. Ryan Hunter-Reay can make a car that doesn't work, and that is something that is going to be a huge factor for the Dreyer and Reinbold team. And it showed in results last year here at the 500, and I don't really expect too much to change on that front.
Looking back in 11th, you're going to find the 2008 winner, Scott Dixon, in 12th. A big improvement for Graham Rahal and Rahal Lindemann Lanigan. This team, like we've talked about time and time again, D&Q last year. This is a very new RLL program on the oval package. I've actually told apparently they have some setup advice from the AJ Foyt camp. I'm not going to dive too much into that because I can't really confirm it, but that might be a bit of a clue on what's going on there. Rounding out 13th, Felix Rosenquist. 14th, Renus VK. The big story of the month, Kyle Larson rounds out 15th. Marcus Ericsson in 16th. Takuma Sato rounds out 17th with a 2:25.194. He actually held the fastest no-toe speed of the afternoon. Roman Grosjean ends up 18th. 19th is going to go to Connor Daly, and then rounding out your top 20 is going to be Linus Lundqvist.
So I wanted to make a point with the Takuma Sato thing, if I got a couple seconds. So Takuma Sato is returning back to Rahal Letterman for the first time since 2021. Yeah. So last year we all know about what happened, how it was an inter-team fight for that last spot, and Graham ended up getting bumped and then found his way back in. So Takuma Sato returns to the team. Keep in mind what team that Takuma Sato was with 1 year ago, and that was Chip Ganassi Racing. As I already mentioned, that team with Alex Palou broke the pole average track record, and so I think Takuma Sato being back in, and he's already said so many times that their focus is on qualifying setup. And he did a lot of qualifying simulations already today, and that's what he said yesterday that they were going to be working on as well. So I think Takuma Sato is really the guinea pig within the team of trying to find a good set that would work across the team to keep them out of that last chance qualifying scenario, while the other cars go work on race setup.
And then looking back towards the slower half of the field, Callum Milot, your winner back at the Spa WEC race, rounds out 21st. Marco Andretti rounds out 22nd. The rookie Marcus Armstrong back in 23rd. Pietro Fittipaldi rounds out 24th. Ed Carpenter back in 25th. 26th is where you're going to find Christian Rasmussen. Christian Lundgaard all the way down in 27th. Tom Blomqvist, the rookie, in 28th, a fellow rookie as well, and Kevin Simpson down in 29th, and then Stingray Robb rounds out the 30th position.
So, and the last note I want to make is if you look down in 34th on the combined toe, no-toe list is Augustin Canapino. Now, here's the interesting fact about that. He ended up third on the no-toe list. So, take everything with a grain of salt. There was a lot of pack ranking today. Really, the only one that you could pinpoint as working on qualifying setups and single run speed alone was Takuma Sato. So the fact that he was able to register a toe lap and it be third is not terrible. So if you're a Juncos Hollinger fan, don't fret yet.
And then, like you said, back in 31st, Catherine Legg, Nolan Siegel, the rookie, down in 32nd, Santino Ferrucci in 33rd, and Augustine Canapino rounds out at 34th. And I'm going to reiterate on that as well with Santino Ferrucci and Stingray Robb. The thing I'm going to note with that team, especially with their engineer Michael Cannon, he has not really been known as somebody that goes out there and sets big PR number laps. He's very much focused on what he needs to do, what he wants to get out of this car, and what he needs to learn heading into qualifying. So he's not going to go out there and risk tearing up a car for no reason whatsoever in a practice session that isn't going to matter come race day. What he's going to do is find the information he needs, get the idea of what the track wants and what the car wants, and then use that come qualifying weekend to really be able to lay a lap down that's going to turn some heads and set some records.
So with Santino Ferrucci, most of the laps that he logged today were done in the first hour of the session. Now, what they were going to do in the last hour is hard to tell because the caution flag flew for weather. In this session, we actually ended up having 7 yellow flags, and 4 of those were for rain, and the others were for track inspection. And the session ended up being red flag for the final, or yellow flag for the final time with 45 minutes to go and would never restart. So it's hard to tell if they would have actually went out and set a number to get themselves a little bit higher up in the pecking order. But, you got to think that some of it, because this is the same car that Ferrucci ran last year as well, there's a lot of carryover from last year, hint, hint. Not just Ferrucci, I'm talking in terms of the entire field, chassis-wise. But it's hard to tell. We know that car is quick because it did well last year, it was on the podium. How much are they going to be trying to help Stingray Robb right now? Because a lot of the attention has to surely be there because he's a little bit of an unknown across the entire 500-mile distance.
And with that, we're going to go straight into the interviews. We did get an opportunity. We missed the bullpen session earlier this morning. Got a bit of confusion with the text messages they sent out with the updates and alerts. But we did get to hear from Scott McLaughlin and Takuma Sato as they brought him up to the media center as the fastest overall speed and the fastest no-toe speed. So we're going to hear from them. And then, of course, our obvious Indy 500 history segment video. But first, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Peak.
Protect your vehicle with Peak Original Equipment Technology. Our formulas match the vehicle manufacturer's technology requirements so that we have the perfect match for every vehicle.
Scott, everybody's got practice plans, starting March and April, but of course the rain can always throw those away. How much have y'all been able to get through in the very limited running that we've had over the last few hours?
That's not a huge amount at all, really. You have plans, absolutely, but they change a lot when you're here, especially this time of year. But I think we're saying it for me. I look at it; it's the same for everyone. It's not like anyone else is going out there and getting running. Like we're all in the same box together. You just got to make the most of the track time that you have. And I felt like we had a really good day today with how much we got through. We were able to sort of put the car away at 6 instead of running all the way to 7, even though the rain didn't stop. So that was always our plan anyway. So it's nice to be in that situation, but at the same time it can change quickly if you let it. You don't. You lose, you get a little bit complacent or whatever. So it's important that we stick with it and keep focused, and hopefully we're thereabouts.
So Takuma, I was sitting up over in turn 1, and towards the last half of that session, I could really feel the wind start to pick up heading towards turn 1. I think one of the flags atop the grandstands almost got ripped off of its holding. Just how challenging were the conditions out there going into turn 1? Because I saw a lot of cars doing some really heavy lifting just to try and make it through that corner without hitting the wall.
Yeah, I think it's quite, not gusty, but it's relatively strong wind, towards the turn 1, which means on entry phase to get to the mid-apex, and then the whole cars are pushing out. So it was quite challenging. I would imagine, if any cars are going to the pack and the cars in front is very struggling for the second half of the corner, whereas turn 2 to turn 3 is probably helping better by the wind, and then turn 4 is having a sort of understeer. So it is always challenging, and myself too, as a kind of qualified simulation by yourself, when you start to trim, it's the same sensation. So it's a mechanical you really need to rotate, and then you need to find the balance. So from that point of view, it was a good exercise today.
And then the other thing I got for you too is we saw from the jump about 15, 17 cars jumping straight onto the racetrack into one huge giant pack. What was it like for yourself running in that this early in the week? Because with the limited track time you guys got, everybody's immediately going into these big pack sessions rather than these long, elongated single car runs that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think you could say quite a few years ago, for the first 2 days, maybe you just want to check up everything and install the cars and system check, and then maybe do some wing sweep, ride height sweep, and then making own aero map and etc. But nowadays, the manufacturers and data sharing system, and we know when we bring the car here, it's relatively in the ballpark, in a good window. Particularly if you look at the weather, from really starting from open test, so last month, like you said, 6 hours, the green flag is very, very short. So it's really rapidly coming up for the first fly day, which means Thursday tomorrow, like Scott said, so many people is going to the qualifying team still is not happy with the race car, etc. So congestion in time really difficult for everyone. That's why I think you could see just banging onto the tire, putting the wings, and see how the car affects in traffic relatively safely. If you can find a mechanically better situation, that is a goal. That's why I think you can see the giant pack from day 1 like today.
If you've been to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, chances are you've parked here in the North 40 lot, which is located just outside the North Chute between turns 3 and 4. And chances are you've been stuck in one of 2 orderly lines that stretch all the way to the outer fencing. But if you wondered how it got that way, back in the days there was free parking here on race day. You'd have to go back to 1986 when on race day morning an unofficial contest was held by the fans called the Dash for the Pole Position for the North 40. The origins of the pole position for the North 40 are unknown, but are believed to have started around 1974. For around 12 years, fans would line the yards of the houses along 30th Street waiting for the yellow shirts to open the gates and get out of the way. Once the gates were open, the various cars, trucks, and even wagons would race in 7 abreast at high speeds to claim the pole position in a land rush style race. Year after year, terrified yellow shirts would do their best not to be caught up in the ensuing carnage that even saw vehicles overturned. Finally, in 1987, enough was enough, as local police upped patrols and discouraged the activity. However, this was not enough to discourage the fans who seek to participate. Threats to rush the new fencing were levied against the officials. In a response to the threats, officials set up piping, more fencing, and even buses across the driveways to keep fans from rushing at the sound of the cannon. As a result of this, there are 2 distinct orderly lines to get into parking spaces in the North 40, as well as it being a paid lot to park in.
And that's going to wrap up our coverage here on Wednesday here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We will be back on Thursday morning to hopefully get some more interviews as well as cover more of the racing action going on here at the Speedway in preparation for the 108th Indianapolis 500-mile race. Of course, the conditions are, I'm not going to say too favorable considering what we're going to be expecting come Saturday and Sunday. The big question going on right now with an IndyCar right now is what's going to be taking place in terms of the qualifying draw come Friday, because if you remember, the chip draw for that is based off of your Friday speed. But with the rain forecasted for all of Friday, there's a big question within the paddock right now is how do you decide who draws where for Saturday's round 1 qualifying?
I think they'll come up with a solution. The solution right now for the obvious lack of running that we've had so far is just if there is daylight in the sky and there is not water falling from said sky, send the cars on the track. Tomorrow morning they're going to be starting at 10 a.m. So when the public gates open, there will be cars on the track and they're going to be running to the usually scheduled 6, but that may change. You never know. But Friday, the weather forecast is not looking too good. I could act like I have a weather screen behind me, but for the sake of it. Saturday is not looking too great either. So there is going to be a lot of... Someone actually made a comparison that this has a lot of a feeling like the 2015 qualifying. Not necessarily an issue with cars flying, thank God, but with the weather was also a factor in that as well.
And with that, we're going to cut it off here for the end of the video. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the coverage that we're giving you guys throughout the month of May, then be sure to subscribe to the channel today. Be sure to like and comment and share the video with everybody you know, as we're going to be ramping up our coverage yet again, not only with qualifying weekend for the Indianapolis 500, but of course the Chicago, Joliet, Elwood, Illinois Route 66 Nationals, which I will be covering live and in person from there.
There.
Well, because someone got mad at me because of the fact that I said it was Chicago, and he said it's not Chicago. So
It's Joliet, but then you said Elwood.
Because
Anyways, all right. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff.
Follow on social media pages, Mighty Mac 03 on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. And until Thursday morning, this has been Mighty Mac, and we will see you next time.